Three little birds. But what do they mean? And how do we live them out? I hope that the sermon this morning helps you think about the epistle lesson, the letter of Paul. He begins, rejoice in the Lord always. Let your gentleness be known to all. And then think about things that are just and pure and good. And he says, remember my example, what I've said to you and what I've done. In other words, Paul invites us today to count our blessings. And I'm going to start with sort of a humorous way, I hope, because humor can be a part of a Happy New Year too. I have two cartoons. This one's of Charlie Brown. I think they're also on the screen. Charlie Brown is holding a beautiful rose in his hand. But notice he's a grump. He's not counting his blessings. He said, I wish these roses didn't have thorns. There are going to be some thorns in the new year, aren't there? And we can grumble about it. But then there's Lucy. Lucy also, did I have the wrong one up? Lucy also is holding a thorn. Holding it close to her heart, she's emotionally attached, and she said, I'm glad these thorns have roses. Who's counting the blessings? Charlotte and Lucy. Today, rejoice in the Lord always, and let's count our blessings. And how do we do that? We look for role models sometimes, scriptural examples, and Paul, writing to the Philippians, is a great example who in the midst of thorns counts his roses. He's in prison. He writes a letter in prison. This is a hyperactive evangelist. With superhuman faith, God has revealed him on the way to Damascus, the Christ love and hope and peace. And he's in jail. He has sailed seas, he's climbed mountains, he's literally walked thousands of miles. He has the thorns of the prison. And what does he say? I have some good news. The prison officials, the imperial guard, and everybody involved in my imprisonment knows I'm in here for Christ. I'm not here as a murderer. I'm not here as a robber. I'm here for Christ. In the thorns of imprisonment, he holds up the rose of salvation in Jesus Christ. And I'm sure he didn't just say the name, Jesus is Savior. I think he might have said something like this. You imperial guards, you celebrate the Pax Romana. The peace of Rome is built on a dictator with great military power who gathers armies with swords and spears and mighty horse and chariot and rules the world by force. I want to tell you about a little baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger, surrounded by shepherds. He grew up not as a mighty warrior, but as someone who humbly walked the paths, caring for the sick, healing them, caring for the hungry, feeding them. Two sisters who were mourning their dead brother Lazarus, he raised him from the dead because he is the resurrection and the life. But his life was not without thorns. His life was not without thorns. He told his loving disciples, there are going to be some hard times ahead. And there were. Thorny people captured him unjustly. An unjust trial and unjust communication, and he's nailed unjustly to a cross. And this mighty Savior could have called legions of party angels, says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. On a thorny cross, he holds up a rose to all of us. When we have sinned, our Savior says to us, Father, forgive them. Happy New Year. They didn't know what they were doing. I am dying on this cross to forgive their sins. And then Paul would have quickly said, but that's not the end of the story, you imperial guard. That's not the end of the story. 3 days later, he rose from the dead. And those disciples who loved him and cared for him, they were still locked behind thorny doors, locked in fear. And suddenly Jesus appears to them and surprises them with the rose. Peace I give you. And if they didn't hear it the first time, he says, peace I give you. And that too, Paul said, wasn't the end of the story. He's not here now. He's not dictating how we do it. He's the beautiful Savior, but he has beautiful saints. And as he rose into heaven, he said, as the Father sent me, so do I send you. Our beautiful Savior is now sending beautiful people. He's sending you and me. We are the beautiful people that our beautiful Savior is enabling us to say, Happy New Year. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, rejoice. Rejoice. And how do we do that? St. Paul in Philippians gives us a lesson plan, a job description, a vocational call. In the translation of the Revised Standard Version, this reads this way: whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, anything excellent and praiseworthy, think of those things. That's the rose that Paul holds before us in sometimes a thorny world. Happy New Year. Today, think about what's true. That's the rose. Worry about lies. That's the thorns. Today, think about what's honorable. That's the rose. Worry about what's disgraceful, sinful, tempting. That's the thorns. Worry about what is just, or think about what is just. That's the rose that Christ gives us in the justification in his life, death, and forgiveness. The pureness, the righteousness that we will celebrate at the altar as he gives his body and blood for us to share. Think about what is sneaky. Worry about what is tricky and deceiving. Those are the thorns of life. Think about what is pleasing. The rose of pleasing salvation. Don't worry about the prickly displeasure of impatience that, like ugly road rage, can be a deadly thorn. Think about what is commendable, what is excellent, what is worthy of praise. How can we do that? We have two marvelous models in front of us. The first, of course, is Jesus Christ himself. He came into a thorny world as the rose of God's love, the rose of forgiveness, the rose of the peace that passes all human understanding, all the thorns that we can throw up with our logic and our emotions. Christ is there with his blooming love to give us salvation. And then he's given us saints. Saints like St. Paul. Remember the last words of the second reading? Use me as your role model. Think of what I said and think of what I did. Of course, we have Jesus here with us today. He promised where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his presence, he's here. So he's here. And the memory of St. Paul is here as he's writing. But today on this Happy New Year, can we think of the roses that we have in your life? Today I'm going to offer you a rosy invitation, hopefully not a thorny thread. As we gather for coffee, let's talk about the wild and the Vikings and the snow and the cold. But let's think about the roses in our lives too. Let's think about roses that have blessed our lives in thorny situations. I'll give 2 personal examples, not that they're important in themselves, but hopefully they stimulate your sentence. I remember as a 5-year-old boy, I was in a thorny situation. I had infected tonsils, and I had to have a painful tonsillectomy. 5 years old, going to be away from home a first time overnight in the hospital. It seemed a thorny situation. I can't remember any of that. I remember that night my mother stayed with me in the hospital. And I remember the next week at home, I didn't have, with my sore throat I guess, I didn't eat bread, meat, potatoes, and vegetables. A week of Jell-O and ice cream. Volunteer for a tonsillectomy? I'm in line. Because I don't remember the thorny pain at all. I remember the rose of my mother. Think of the roses in your life. The second rose I think of is David Schaus. David Schaus was a missionary with us in Papua New Guinea. Suddenly he had a terrible medical diagnosis. The doctors in Papua New Guinea said, you have to return to the United States. There's not the kind of care that you need here in Papua New Guinea or in Australia. So quickly as possible, he and his wife caught a plane to the United States. There was a layover, a stopover in Hong Kong, and they took David off the plane. He went to a British hospital, and the medical people there told him, you have 2 hours to live. What a thorn. What David did gave us the rose, all of us who knew him. He told his wife, Please read to me Paul's letter to the Philippians. In a thorny situation of death, minutes away, our friend David Ramshaus gave us a rose we'll never forget. When we read Philippians, and I hope you go home and read Philippians, think of a man dying unexpectedly, saying, rejoice in the Lord always. Let your gentleness be made known to all. Think of what is pure and right and honorable and just and commendable, excellent and worthy of praise. Happy New Year. There'll be some thorns, but grab those roses with joy to the world, because we have a beautiful Savior who has surrounded us with beautiful, rosy people. God's blessings to you. Amen.